Welcome to the Storm Surf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 24th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of a gale fading in the Gulf, still producing 18, 19-foot seas, pushing towards California. Good for, we'll say wind swell, grade surf, probably for the whole U.S. West Coast for the next couple of days. Other than that, a new gale trying to develop off of Japan, seas currently at 22 feet and forecast to build while lifting northeast. Let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start this week's tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, and that's sort of what we have right there and right there. That is basically a dip in the jet stream, and that helps create sort of an eddy, which results in a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean's surface, and that is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, winds on the ocean's surface generate seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. All right, so we have two areas of interest. This one right off the Kuril Islands here, and this may be more so because we see 1, 2, 3, almost 4. That's 160, 170 knot winds. You want good, strong winds feeding the trough. We have that here. Not so much here, only with maybe 120, 130 knot winds. But either way, we'll take what we can get. And you also see over the just west of the or east of the date line, we have a sort of a split jet stream. That is, the northern branch goes up here and then falls into this trough. Southern branch falls south over Hawaii and then joins the northern branch and semi-consolidated, pushing into we'll say northern Baja. Between the split flow, typically you get high pressure, which does not generally produce surf, but in this case produces strong northeast winds relative to Hawaii. All right, so let's put this into motion, see where we're at. Trough continues in the Gulf into Monday and even into Tuesday. The trough continues also up here, feeding what we already know is some sort of a gale developing, but this looks like it's focused on the North Dateline region, and certainly whatever forms here isn't going to make it into this split region. It's like a brick wall right there. Anyway, so we get into Tuesday. Looks like low pressure moving into the U.S. West Coast. The jet stream almost pushing into, there it is, pushing into northern California, we'll say. And then we get into Wednesday. That continues. If anything, this low starts moving on shore. Looks like a weather event for California. Another trough builds here off of the Kuril Islands on Wednesday. Good amount of solid winds there, not particularly strong, maybe 150 knot winds, feeding that trough a little bit, and then winds building even more as we get into Thursday. Now notice off here, the jet stream's just all kind of confused. The northern branch, this is like Thursday night, pushing north up into Alaska and down over Canada. The southern branch, weak, diffuse, kind of meandering all over the place. No real support for gale development, even though it looks like there's a trough there. That'd probably be like maybe some sort of weak cutoff low. Now here's the good new development. Starting Friday, it looks like winds are supposed to start building. The jets consolidated, 190 knot winds pushing off Japan. That would certainly help support some sort of gale formation, probably in this area. We're looking for a real decent sized trough to set up. That's 190, 200 knot winds. And as we get into Sunday night, it looks like something. It looks like the cutoff portion of the jet might just dissipate and the jet might push east. Maybe, just maybe. Of course, you never believe a model this far out into the future, but it looks like perhaps an improving pattern setting up maybe over the date line a week out. All right, let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds, and as expected, a weak low pressure. What is that, like maybe 1,000 millibars? That's like not even hardly low pressure. Sitting in the Gulf, producing a small area, 30 knot north winds. Good for wind swell at best. There's your high pressure between the split branches of the jet. And here's our new low developing. We'll call it a 980 millibar low. That's a little bit more of a low, but with the high pressure here, this low is likely to get deflected off to the north. Let's put it in motion. See, sure enough, there we go. You can see underneath the tags here, probably 50 knot winds aimed off to the east, getting some traction on the ocean surface, but the low lifting, or the gale actually lifting north pretty quick as we get into, oh, this is only Sunday night, 55 knot winds right over, we call this the North Dateline region because there's the dateline. That's about as far north as you can go before you get into the Bering Sea, and no swell ever makes it through the Aleutian Islands. So 55-knot winds, and then boom, by Monday morning, it's in the Bering Sea. All fetch is totally obscured or shadowed or whatever you want to call it behind the Aleutian Islands. No swell. Oh, there is 30-knot, 35-knot winds here south, but those quickly dissipate. And then we kind of go into a funk. But new on the models, another gale. Actually, like a week ago, this was on the models, then disappeared, and now just recently, as we're almost within the 48-hour window, shows up again, forming off Japan on Tuesday, building pretty solid 55-knot winds. That makes it a storm. Anything over 50-knot winds is a storm. 55-knot winds aimed east, but it too heading for the North Dateline region. Broader area fetch here, though, 55-knot winds, looking pretty solid on Wednesday, making zero eastward progress. So, this is sort of more like distant swell for Hawaii and even much more distant swell for the U.S. West Coast, and that sort of peters out. Cutoff low forms on Thursday night north of Hawaii, 30-knot winds aimed at the islands. Good for wind swell, probably, and that's about it. Notice the low still hanging even as we get into Saturday, but of no real interest. Cutoff low continues in the Gulf of Alaska, finally fades out Saturday night. And then here's where things get interesting. On Sunday, supposedly, a new storm. Remember, the jet is supposed to be building here over the dateline, developing 50-knot winds, just barely, pushing east into midday Sunday and into Sunday night, building, getting larger in coverage, those winds getting better purchase on the ocean surface, and just maybe that could help kick up some swell for us. So, something to look forward to. So let's take a look at the effect of those winds on the ocean surface, but first we're going back in time. We're going to Wednesday of last week. Gale developed in the Gulf of Alaska. This is what is making swell that has pretty much passed Hawaii now and has passed its peak. It peaked in Northern California on Saturday night, and it's probably about peaking in Southern California as we speak. 32-foot seas built to maybe 34-foot seas. Another little continued push of 32, 33-foot seas over a pretty decent size area. And you can see this whole thing was just pushing east pretty well. And then secondary fetch into Friday, making 22-foot seas, and that is fading out as we got into Sunday. That swell, again, is hitting the U.S. West Coast now. And here's the situation at this very moment. 12Z Sunday, okay, actually Sunday morning. Again, fading gale in the Gulf, 18, 19-foot seas. Newly developing North Dateline storm developing off of Japan, 22-foot seas. That quickly is to ramp up to, let's say, 28, 29.5-foot seas, actually. Right where the cross is right there. See the plus sign? That's the highest seas anywhere in this plot here. So that'd be the North Pacific Ocean. 29.5-foot seas. And that to build as we get into Monday morning to 36-foot seas. So maybe a short little blast of sideband swell for Hawaii and about the same deal for the U.S. West Coast. But we also know low pressure is supposed to be pushing or sitting over here in the Gulf, likely making for a weathery mess for at least North and Central California. So this swell will be of no real interest. All right. And then you see a little bit of low pressure off the U.S. West Coast again at Tuesday night. Wednesday, here comes the next North Dateline storm, 31.8-foot seas. And that's to build. This is a stronger system up to 43-foot seas, but you kind of get the sense most of that energy's aimed more at Alaska. It'll actually follow the Great Circle paths and probably make it into California, though, Northern California. But then by Thursday, this guy pretty much flames out and he's gone. And then we look at, broad area of 23, 24-foot seas. That's good for maybe 14-second period. Yeah, it'll make it into the U.S. West Coast, but be pretty decayed by the time it gets there. Long run of, we'll say, small to moderate background swell or so. Cutoff low north of Hawaii, generating 18-foot seas. That's good for wind swell, north-angled wind swell for Hawaii. And then finally, Sunday, things start looking a little more serious if you believe the models. New gale developing, seas building towards, 37 feet aimed off to the east. Good for Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. We'll keep our eyes on that one as we get deeper into the week. All right, the wind situation for Hawaii, U.S. West Coast. We know there's a front developing off of California. South winds still had not built into Northern California as of about 3 o'clock, but they look like they're on the hairy edge of wanting to do that. Still, relatively glassy conditions even as far north as San Francisco at 3 o'clock this afternoon. All right, but you see, south winds forecast as we get into Sunday night and into Monday off California. Trades driven by high pressure, by the split in the jet stream, as has been the case all winter. Strong, I shouldn't say severe, but solid, strong trades or northeast winds for Hawaii, just nonstop, incessant. Here comes low pressure, kind of a cutoff low. It's not really, there's a trough here, but not a strong low, developing off of the California coast with 30-knot winds. You can see it there, pushing towards the coast. More south winds as we get into Tuesday night. Wednesday, just kind of a general mess. South winds for Hawaii also on Wednesday, associated with low pressure there until the front blows through and then winds turn northwest. We get into Thursday, then you're back to this sort of north wind pattern for the Hawaiian Islands, and high pressure trying to build relative to California, trying to not be too strong though, but still you can see northwest winds over the central California coast. Here comes another low. This is the cutoff low. Broad area, 30-knot winds, aimed good for swell generation for Hawaii, but this high over here just generating more north winds for Hawaii as we get into Saturday and Saturday for sure. And California, just not a great wind pattern. I mean, it's getting to be spring, typical to get north winds. I don't see strong north winds, not yet at least. And here we are, 180 hours out. Actually, just a steady 15-knot north, 10-knot north winds along north and central California coast. Winds finally turn towards trades relative to Hawaii. All right, so let's go take a look at precipitation. And here we're focusing mainly on California. Again, it's Sunday. Front setting up off the coast. You can see it. Here comes the rain north of the Golden Gate for Monday morning. Building south to Monterey Bay. Snow in the higher elevations of Tahoe. Looking mainly focused on Tahoe. Maybe some fairly strong snow over a small area Monday afternoon, and that quickly sort of fades out while it falls south. More rain building off the coast as we get into Tuesday, and by Wednesday, here comes another good dose of rain for all of north central California, and snow for the mountains as we get, again, higher elevations Wednesday night into Thursday. Residual dribbles of rain into Thursday and then fading out, and then things clear up, high pressure taking over. Cutoff low north of Hawaii does not make it to the U.S. West Coast. High pressure holding in control, and by Sunday, high pressure looks to rule supreme and snow backing off for California. Let's go take a look at snow potential for Tahoe and Mammoth. And this for Squaw Valley for the week, 30 inches of snow, possible, mainly at higher elevations. Here's the real issue. So this dark line is the bottom of Squaw in the valley. Top line's the top of Squaw. Where you have blue and whites, that's snow. Where you have gray, that's sleet. And where you have red, it would be rain if there were precipitation. Precip levels look fine until you get till about the 29th or so. Then you see things get very warm. It'd be rain the whole way to the top after that. Looks like a definite warm-up is setting up. Let's go take a look at Kirkwood. Pretty much the same deal. 35 inches of snow for Kirkwood, upper elevations. The good news is, well, there's really no good news. It's fine up until the point where it gets warm, and then it's warm the whole way to the top, even at Kirkwood. Their elevation isn't going to save them. And Mammoth with 10 or 11 inches of snow. And pretty much the same deal, because their base elevation is 8,000 feet. Still, it looks pretty warm. Not to the whole, maybe not rain the whole way to the top, but certainly mid-mountain rain if there were precipitation out this far, but there isn't. So just a warm-up. This actually sets you up for spring skiing conditions. If you can get 7 to 10 days of non-freezing temperatures, then you start getting corn snow, and that can be a lot of fun too. All right, let's take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian Oscillation and El Nino? And of course, the MJO, when in the active phase, helps feed the jet stream, which in turn helps fuel storm development. And of course, El Nino, when you're in El Nino, that basically acts like a long-running active phase of the MJO. That really helps fuel storm development, assuming it's a reasonably strong El Nino. And of course, the inverse is also true. The inactive phase of the MJO steals energy from the jet stream, causes it to split, makes things pretty weak and not favorable for storm development. And of course, La Nina, we all know about that. So we like to look for the active phase of the MJO. So what we do, there's an area, a place we call the Kelvin wave generation area. So this is the Pacific, this is the equator right here. Dateline 180 right there, that's New Guinea, so the far west Pacific. And we're looking in the area from 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. Just draw a box in your mind right around here. This is actual winds per the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. You see winds are out of the east pretty much the whole way across the Pacific, maybe a little weaker in the West Pacific. But what we're really interested in is anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You see winds a little bit stronger out of the east here in the East Pacific, but generally neutral, if not light westerly here in the Kelvin wave generation area. When they are westerly, when trades are weaker than normal and anomalies are westerly, then that suggests perhaps the active phase of the MJO building the West Pacific, and that would be a good thing if it were to happen. We can look at wind anomalies. This is at 850 millibars. That's about 4,700 feet. Okay, so the equator is right there. There's South America. Dateline right there. Kelvin wave generation area right in here. What we're looking for is the oranges and the reds and arrows out of the west right in this area. That would show the active phase of the MJO. We're not really seeing it, but we see a modestly building area of west winds as we get into, that was the 21st. We start on the 18th day by day. And here we are on the 22nd. So it almost kind of looks like the active phase of the MJO is trying to build in the far west Pacific. That would be good. Again, here's 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, but this is the whole planet on one chart and with time here. So go back in time, and what we're looking for is reds and oranges in the Kelvin wave generation area. So right down the middle of the chart, this is, you can see it right here, 180 degrees, that's the date line. So the Kelvin wave generation area is between these two tick marks. And if you the same two tick marks, so you go down, starting somewhere around mid-March, we got westerly anomalies weekly building, and here's today's date right now, and this looks like westerly anomalies, not particularly strong, but steady westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, and the forecast is for that to continue for the next week. So it sort of looks like the active phase of the MJO is in effect, but not very strong, and that probably explains why it's not strongly influencing the jet stream either, but it's still sort of a general tendency to feed energy into the jet stream and occasional spurts of storm energy, but just nothing over the top. Let's go out 2 weeks and see what's going on. Okay, so this is outgoing long wave radiation forecast. The blues, right, South America, Australia, New Guinea. Dateline runs right there, equator right across the middle, Kelvin wave generation area basically right in there. So right now, this looks like the blues are what they call negative anomalies, meaning less sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, meaning more clouds, meaning the active phase of the MJO. So it looks like this, per the statistic model, the active phase of the MJO is in control, should hold for about the next week, but then move east and fade out. And per this model, the inactive phase of the MJO is to build 2 weeks out. So if there was ever a window for storm development, it's about the next week per this model. The GEFS model, the dynamic model, says the active phase is to only maybe hold for a couple of days, then fall apart. And then the inactive phase builds, but notice, rather than being in the West Pacific, it's over the maritime continent, not getting into the Pacific. But neither chart suggests any sort of strong active phase development, so no super strong support for storm production. Phase diagram charts, another way to sort of assess the strength of the MJO and its forecast. So this circle here, assume you're looking down on the North Pole, and the MJO moves from west to east from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent over the West Pacific under the United States, across the Atlantic, into North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is, so it's right here, we'll say in the West Pacific, but if it's inside the circle, it's very weak. If it's way out here on the periphery, it's considered very strong. This is the previous path back in, February. You see it was pretty strong over in the Indian Ocean, made it to about, March 8th, and then collapsed over the maritime continent. Has been there ever since, and the forecast for the statistic model suggests, if anything, the active phase is to build, but it'll be in the Indian Ocean 2 weeks from now. The dynamic model, not even as generous as that, just saying the active phase to be extremely weak, just noodling around and basically of no use to anyone. Now here's the upper level model, and this model is for looking at areas favorable for precipitation. Again, one can interpret that to be the active phase, the MJO. And as expected, so there's New Guinea, there's the equator, dateline, probably running somewhere out there, South America, Australia, you get it. So greens, favorable for precipitation. So the active phase of the MJO today, moving slowly west, and by April 13th, pretty much gone, moving into Central America. Here comes that inactive phase that the other models were catching up on, or indicating in the West Pacific about April 3rd. It makes its track across the North Pacific into about the end of April. So April doesn't look particularly good for storm development. And then another active but weak active phase, the MJO, sets in the West Pacific, we'll say late April, moving off to the east. But again, none of the MJO signals look particularly strong, active or inactive. We can go out yet a little bit further. This is the CFS model. Again, whole planet on one chart. The Kelvin wave generation area, where we're really interested, between these two tick marks going down. One thing that strikes, and this goes back to December 29th, you just scan down here, just see nonstop the reds and oranges, westerly anomalies, piles of it. Not so much any clear signs of the active phase of the MJO, but a lot of westerly anomalies. Here's where we are today, the forecast. And this solid contour, that's the active phase of the MJO. So the active phase of the MJO in the Kelvin wave generation area, but pretty, we'll say reasonably strong for the next 4 to 5 days, then kind of falling apart. Still, weak westerly anomalies are forecast through the next month. So this all speaks to this El Nino thing we've been kind of talking about. I mean, it clearly looks like El Nino is trying to organize with just the preponderance of westerly anomalies. You don't normally get this much westerly anomalies. So there's some El Nino tendency trying to set up. The question is it real? I mean, it's officially El Nino, but it's not really. It's so weak, it's hardly there. And then we go out even further. This is the 3-month CFS model run. Past performance is down here. Again, Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks going up. You can see December, January. Strong westerly wind bursts, the oranges and yellows, occurred back in February. That created a Kelvin wave. Here we are today. Weak westerly anomalies forecast continuing. The models go on and off suggesting maybe a westerly wind burst sometime in the April time frame, but we don't really think that's likely. More than likely, this is the more likely scenario. Just steady westerly anomalies. Let's overlay the MJO. Okay, so here you go. The solid contours are the active phase of the MJO. You can see the active phase pushing through the West Pacific. Here we are today, building somewhat, continuing into even April, late April, something like that. So that's a little bit different than what we saw in some of the other models that suggest the inactive phase is supposed to set up in the next week or so. This looks like active phase, westerly anomalies, storm production, still possible through at least the end of April. That would be good. And then you get this just very weak MJO pattern following that, but still westerly anomalies. When the MJO completely collapses, typically that's a sign of El Nino. El Nino is like a long-running active phase of the MJO, but it basically wipes out the MJO. Let's put the low-pass filter on here. Here we go. All right, so what's this mean? Well, this is the low-pass filter. Solid contours suggest areas sort of like a low pressure bias, which is another way of saying El Nino if you want to, right on the date line. Okay, so we had 3 contour lines into December, and we had good storm production until then. Then we lost one of the contour lines, and that sort of explains why the storm pattern just fell apart. We lost all its momentum. El Nino kind of weakened. And then in March, it was actually mid-February, but the momentum in the atmosphere maybe started building in March. That explains why the recent run of storms and swell lately. And if anything, looks like that might continue the whole way through the month of April. That would be good if that were true. And this third contour line is supposed to continue on into June and beyond. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for the North Pacific, but it might mean a favorable support for southern hemistorms as well. The influence is not as direct in the southern hemi as it is with the northern hemisphere, but still, it might mean a pretty decent summer is in the offing. All right, enough of the MJO. What's going on in the ocean? Subsurface ocean temperatures. So this also gives you indications about El Nino, and that's really what our focus is now. Are we moving towards a real El Nino or not? Okay. This is the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. The X's are sensors on the TAO buoy anchor line. It's going the whole way across the Pacific on the equator. And you get temperature profile data. And you see warmer temperatures, 30 degrees Celsius here in the West Pacific. 28-degree isotherm line here. It was over at 40 west yesterday, sort of backing off a little bit today to 142 west, but sort of suggests maybe warm water is pushing off to the east. That's typically what happens when you get those westerly anomalies. That's why we're so obsessed with the MJO and development of Kelvin waves and westerly anomalies in the West Pacific, because if you get enough of that, enough westerly wind bursts and active phases of the MJO, they start taking this warm water, pushing it off to the east in the form of Kelvin waves. And if you get enough of that, warm water starts building here in the East Pacific, and that's the hallmark of El Nino. And that changes the entire global upper level circulation, at the jet stream level, and that feeds the storm track in winter months into the Gulf of Alaska and over the Dateline region. All right, so right now, warm water, it was holed up like all of February over here at 160. It's been making a significant push to the east lately, and that suggests a Kelvin wave is pushing east. And still, 24-degree Celsius temperatures pushing into Ecuador, so that's certainly not La Nina, maybe some low-grade El Nino. Here's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You see warm water, much warmer than normal, 3 degrees Celsius over in the far East Pacific. This is that Kelvin wave we were talking about. Westerly anomalies blow here over in the West Pacific. Take that warm water that's there, start pushing it to the east, but doesn't do it on the surface. Because remember, you got trades blowing from the east at the surface. The warm water falls to depth and down at about 150 meters and then makes its whole way across the Pacific under the equator. And that's what you're seeing here. And this ball of warm water is what they call a Kelvin wave. We had that very strong westerly wind burst back in February. That's what created this Kelvin wave. And there's some signs that maybe it's trying to start erupting into the Ecuador coast now, though that seems a little bit early. Here's another modeled view of that data as of March 19th. You see clearly, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6 degree, you can just barely see it in there. 6 degree above normal Celsius water temperatures in this region. That's pretty warm indeed, and it's all starting to focus on the Galapagos. There's the last little bit of the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, cool water gurgling to the surface. This warm water is right on the verge of starting to hit the surface here and then erupting, and that should be interesting when it happens. Also notice that you have warm water the whole way back to 1/5, way over the date line, well west of the date line. So months of warm water queued up here subsurface. Another way to verify that data, sea level anomalies, is from the Jason 3 satellite. It looks like Jason 2 is down. If you noticed on our site, no Jason 2 data has been showing up on the model overlays for a month now. We were hoping it would come back. We think it could be gone for good. If that is, we'll switch over to the Jason 3 data, and then we'll be back up and running. Anyway, so there's South America, there's Central America, Australia, New Guinea, Equator, dateline right there. You see there's kind of 5 and 10 centimeter anomalies. So this is strip out all the waves, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tides. If you see a bump on the ocean surface on the equator in the Pacific, that typically means you have warm water at depth. Warm water at depth, of course, expands, and that creates the bump on the ocean surface. So all this means is there's a high likelihood that there's warm water or a Kelvin wave under the equator in this region here. So there's Hawaii, there's Baja. So the whole area from south of Hawaii to south of Baja on the equator, there's warm water deep down in the ocean, and it's likely going to erupt at the ocean surface over here sometime in the next month or two. And then our favorite chart, the upper ocean heat anomalies. By upper ocean, it's really 300 meters down, and to the surface. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Of course, the oranges and yellows are warmer than normal temperatures. You can kind of see a migration of warm water there in April of last year. That was a Kelvin wave. Upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, cooler waters. Stronger Kelvin wave last fall in September, making it the whole way across the Pacific into the December-January time frame. And then here we are right now. Here's yet the 3rd/4th of 2 westerly wind bursts formed this Kelvin wave, and it is the strongest of any of them so far. Started in the January-February time frame, and here we are in March, almost April, and the Kelvin wave is about 2/3 of the way across the Pacific. Give it another month or so to start erupting, and we'll see what happens. There's your upwelling phase of the last Kelvin wave cycle. So this is Kelvin wave number 3 over the past year, poised to hit Ecuador. Let's go take a look at ocean surface temperatures now. Okay, we've had 2 Kelvin waves. Is there any evidence of it on the ocean surface? Sure. See the oranges and reds? There's warm water on the equator. El Nino, when you get El Nino, it kind of does this triangle thing right in like here, and you kind of see it. Maybe not quite as marked as last week's report, but still a warm pattern. But this is kind of interesting. This developed just this week. Cool water along Peru or along the immediate coast. We had this finger of really cool water pushing down off of Panama to the Galapagos. That appears to be fading some. We think maybe some of this is just the last of that upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, before the next Kelvin wave hits, cool water squeezing out to the surface. So we'll see. But a somewhat El Nino-ish looking pattern, but not fully El Nino. The trend for the past 7 days, yellows and oranges. Okay, there was that cold finger that was coming down off of Panama. It's warming dramatically now, but then here's this new cooling along Peru showing up. But again, all this is kind of just really small area. The general trend out over the wider, we'll call it East and Central Pacific, is generic, slight warming, but nothing hugely, nothing screaming El Nino. And here's the actual trend, sea surface temperature anomalies as of March 23rd. Again, there's your cool water along Peru and up off of Panama, but a general light warming trend over the equator. You kind of have your triangle thing going there, but nothing clear. I mean, and you'd want to see like oranges and reds building off in here if we were in some strong El Nino, but typically you wouldn't see that till the peak of El Nino, and that would be in the December-ish time frame. So given the time of year and sort of what's going on, this is certainly better than La Nina. It doesn't indicate any significant El Nino development at the moment, but it doesn't preclude it either. Temperatures in the Nino 1.2 region is the area right there along Peru and Ecuador. The latest today, basically dead neutral, 0.072 degrees above normal. You see, we had sort of a warming trend going on, and then it's been steadily fading since January into March, and really hasn't come back. But this is a noisy area anyway, and this is not the official El Nino monitoring region. The Nino 3.4 this is the area from 120 west, so basically south of California on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, out to 170 west. So temperatures today, 0.802, yeah, right there, about 3/4 of a degree above normal. And the trend, if anything, you kind of see it was kind of going down, and lately, since February, slowly building. You know, not a strong trend, but certainly we're not down here in La Nina territory at all. General warming pattern, general warming trend, that should be good. If that can keep up the whole way through the summer, that would actually do pretty well. That'll set some slow, steady momentum going in the atmosphere, and that's perfectly fine. We don't need a full-on El Nino, just steady warming to get us feeding the jet stream energy and to feed the storm track as we get into next fall and even through the summer. What's the sea surface temperature forecast in the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region? Okay, well, right now it suggests we're 1 degree above normal. That's, we're about 0.8, something like that. So that's about right. So we get into April and through the spring, into the summer in July, temperatures are supposed to go up to 1.45 degrees above normal. That would be a definite El Nino, but one would expect that to continue and hold into December. But if anything, it's supposed to slowly back off. That maybe isn't so bad. If you get a big El Nino, then you end up with La Nina right behind it. We don't want that. If you just get this warming and it slowly tapers off, then maybe you won't fall negative and you'll just sort of go into this multi-year slow warming thing. That would be a sign of the PDO, perhaps. And the PDO is like the equivalent of a 15 or 20-year El Nino. So we're not sure exactly what's going on here, but the sense is that warming is supposed to be hanging on for a good amount of time and not supposed to disappear anytime soon. Let's go take a look at its effects on the atmosphere. Here's the Southern Oscillation Index values. Difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When the index is negative and strongly negative, that means El Nino. If it's positive, that means La Nina. Today, we're at positive 4.74, but you can see, we'll just go back past month, it's been negative, and at times it was actually strongly negative. It's been like negative for 40 days or more. These are the first two positive numbers over that entire stretch. 30-day average sort of takes some of the noise out of this, tells you where you are. We were down to minus 15, which certainly was indicative of a strong or long-running active phase of the MJO, but today we're at minus 7.23. The 90-day average takes yet more noise out of it. And the good news here is we were down at just minus 1.19, which is neutral. Today we're at minus 6.56. That's approaching, weak El Nino status from a El Nino perspective. Another gauge is, if you've been reading anything about what's going on in Australia, when you see wildfires and drought in Australia, that's a typical sign of El Nino. They have been suffering horribly there. It's been very dry. And so this combined with that information suggests that, perhaps maybe some sort of El Nino is in play. And the final atmospheric indicator, the ESPI index. Instead of difference in pressure between the area north of Darwin here and over the equatorial Pacific, it's difference in precipitation. When you have less rainfall here, the index goes negative. More rainfall here, it goes positive. Today, we're at 0.40. I think we were up to plus 0.9 or 0.99 even, maybe a couple of weeks ago, something like that. It's backed off. It actually went down to 0.33, and now it's starting to creep up again. You can kind of look at the chart here. See Australia with the yellows, negative anomalies, meaning drier than normal. And here you are looking at the Pacific now, greens and maybe wetter than normal. This sort of smells like some sort of weak El Nino trying to organize, but too early in the year to know for sure. Once we get into maybe fall, then we'll have a much better handle on what's going to go on. Right now, we're in the spring unpredictability barrier. That runs from late February, March through the end of May. So it's hard to gauge what's going on. The models have a hard time. The atmosphere sometimes doesn't really give up clues very easily either. So for right now, there is swell in the water. That's a good thing. There's actually a small pulse of southern hemi swell working its way towards Southern California, too. I mean, by small, we're talking maybe 2 feet at 16 seconds or something like that. But that's okay. That'd be good. Anyway, and the models suggest, 2 North Dateline storms forecast, producing some seas and small swell. And then maybe a week out, something stronger on the Dateline, which would be really nice. All said and done, active phase of the MJO looking to set up through the month of April. That would be good, too. That would feed storm, more surf, theoretically. And then, of course, our slowly building sort of, we'll call it El Nino-ish sort of thing going on, and expected to continue for the foreseeable future. So all is generally good. It could be a heck of a lot worse. We could be in La Nina. We're nowhere close to that. We're in a slow warming phase. Maybe the PDO is turning the corner. We've been saying this for, a year or two now. No clear signs of anything one way or the other yet, but, try to read the tea leaves and figure out as best you can. So, things looking good, still surfing the water, more coming, maybe not huge, but rideable and fun. Get what you can. We'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.